Hey everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com and it's time for Monday Night Raw. But how do we know how good it was? By assigning each individual segment a lovely individual grade. And it wasn't just any normal Monday Night Raw either. There was a lot of developments heading into Money in the Bank. So without any further ado, let's get straight into it because this is Monday Night Raw Graded. We open the show not with the McMahon, no, not with Triple H either, but with a roster member. How novel. Alexa Bliss, who's sort of a pseudo-authority figure sometimes, but sometimes isn't as well, so that's alright. She actually wrestled later on tonight, but she was here to announce the 4 male competitors for Raw's side of Money in the Bank. That's right, Alexa announced the format, which is basically 4 men from Raw, 4 men from SmackDown, 4 women from Raw, 4 women from SmackDown, 2 ladder matches, Bob's your uncle. And the 4 men from Raw are, let's see if I can remember this off the top of my head, Braun Strowman, Ricochet, Drew McIntyre and Baron Corbin. And she introduces them one by one and they all come out in very Raw opening segment fashion. And I don't really know what to report here, to be honest, because it was obvious that they were just trying to sort of fill time and build a little bit of tension, but considering that they're all going into the Money in the Bank match against each other, it all felt a little bit casual as well. They were all trying to sort of bring up each other's past failures in a bit of a whiny way, or Corbin would get annoyed at Alexa for not remembering his list of accolades during his entrance, and it all was just a bit lacking in intensity, apart from Drew, who was just tweaking out. He was just shouting at everyone, cutting off people's lines, getting in their faces, trying desperately to sort of inject the segment with some spark of life, but it didn't quite work, and the only time it really ramped up was when Braun Strowman at the end just went, "Shut up!" and proposed a tag team match between himself and Ricochet and the 2 heel boys. Now this opening segment gets a C+, right? But I first do just want to say that I enjoyed the selection of the 4 Raw superstars in the men's Money in the Bank ladder match. I thought that was a pretty good and varied selection. You know, you've got Strowman, the big monster who was entertaining last year when he won. You've got Ricochet, of course, because he's made for that sort of match. You've got Drew, maybe a winner of the match, maybe one of the front runners, and you've also got Corbin, I guess, to soak up the crowd heat and stuff. I would have liked to have seen Samoa Joe in there, maybe instead of Baron Corbin, considering that he's already won the briefcase once, and he's very, very unlikely to win it again. So I think Joe would have added more of a sense of urgency. I'd even have liked to see the briefcase on Joe, to be honest, but it's not too bad. But why does this segment then get a low grade if I'm generally happy with the selection of everybody? Well, it was just another one of those Raw opening segments, wasn't it? Another one of those ones where it's like, let's bring everyone out one by one. Now they're going to have a little argument, and now we're going into a tag match. And it seems to happen like almost every week. And now on to that tag match, Ricochet and Braun Strowman against Baron Corbin and Drew McIntyre. Now, this was a pretty okay match. It was decent, but the crowd was so hot for it. I don't really understand why, but the crowd, they were really hot in the opening segment as well, and they only dipped a few times throughout the night. Let's actually check where the crowd were from. Lexington, Kentucky. So Ricochet's from Kentucky, I know this, that's probably why the crowd was so hot. But don't worry, because I'm going to bolster this video with some bonus information about Lexington, the great city of Lexington, I must say. It's the horse capital of the world, that's its nickname, and one of the famous people to come out of Lexington is actor Michael Shannon, who plays Greg, Eminem's mother's abusive boyfriend in 8 Mile, the one who Eminem fights with in the trailer, and also one of the main antagonists in Kangaroo Jack. I absolutely love that film. I haven't watched it in about 15 years, but my god, what a TV show. Not even a TV show, just a movie. What a piece of art Kangaroo Jack is. But now back to the actual wrestling, and this match gets a B. I thought it was perfectly decent. I enjoyed some of the action, some of the little spots they did, felt a little bit NXT at times. It wasn't like an NXT caliber match, but it was alright, such as Drew popping Ricochet up into a headbutt out of mid-air, and Ricochet sold it perfectly, of course he did. The finish was really good as well, with Corbin tagging himself in, blind tagging himself in, to try and steal another win from Drew, but then he got himself into trouble and turned around trying to run away from the babyfaces. Drew clocked him with a right hand, power slam, shooting star press from Ricochet, and the babyfaces pick up the big victory while Drew stalks to the back, and he's betrayed Baron Corbin, and it's every man for himself at Money in the Bank. Decent little story, played off past exchanges, and Drew got his revenge for last week when Corbin stole the win from him, so I didn't mind it in the slightest. Next up, it's the Club versus the Usos. Yeah, the Club are now on Raw for those keeping track, so if you're keeping score at home, Club now on Raw. Write it down. But that's not the weirdest development here. The weirdest thing is the Usos' entrance, because they come out like R-Truth. They're singing along to their own entrance music. Like literally, they both have microphones and they're going, "Down, Since! day one-ish, we're the Usos. And I'm getting quite worried because even though they're not, anywhere near what they used to be when they were really bland baby faces, it's certainly a step in that direction. It honestly feels like there's been some sort of focus group backstage going like, what can we add to the Usos? And honestly, they should say nothing, because the Usos are perfectly fine as they are. I really enjoy their intense and cool gimmick. But it's like they've gone, we need something else. Why don't they sing their own entrance music? And then before the match as well, they can get in the ring and get them to play the song again and do it again. And that'll get the crowd really lit, Litty 3K19. And I'm just like, don't mess with the winning formula. Stop it. The Usos get the win after a bunch of super kicks and a big splash from the top, but that's not what this segment's going to be remembered for. Oh no. And it was a decent match as well, but it got totally overshadowed by just what the hell happened next. So the Usos air some footage on the Titantron and go, look at this. We have caught the Revival in an embarrassing situation, everybody. Ha ha! So the video is the Usos sneaking past a sort of shower area backstage, and they look inside, and the Revival are shaving each other's backs. And the Usos are like, ha ha, got him. And then the crowd are all like, oh man. Oh. The Revival come out and defend themselves, and to be honest, Scott Dawson has a pretty funny line about how his arms and his lats are too big and he can't reach around his back, so he needs Dash Wilder's help to shave the hair on there because he's a man. But generally, the whole concept of this is stupid. Like, you've got two of the best tag teams in the world. Put them in a 30-minute Iron Man, hardcore, any gimmick you want. Put them in matches against each other and they'll deliver. Don't build the feud around whether one team shaves each other's backs in the shower or not. It's so schoolboy, and it's so, I don't want to say it, but it seems to be straight from the mind of, you know who I'm. Anyway, this segment gets a D, and I'm going to say no more on the matter. Next up, we get Miz TV with Miz's guest this week, Bobby Lashley. No Leo Rush. Maybe that backstage heat is real, who knows? This means, of course, that Bobby Lashley has no mouthpiece for once, and he has to speak for himself, and he does. But literally does, like, as in the third person. He's like, Bobby Lashley thinks this. Well, Bobby Lashley doesn't like that you've said that. And I couldn't help but think, it's like they've forgotten to edit Leo Rush's usual script, and they've just gone, oh, give that to Bobby, you'll figure it out. And he's looked at it and just decided to talk in the third person like The Rock. But I really hope that's what's happened. I don't think it is, but I'd love it if that was true. Miz cuts quite an interesting promo, has a quite interesting point of view actually, and says, you know what, Bobby, you're such a raw athlete, you've got great natural talent, but some people out there would actually argue that you haven't quite put it all together yet. And Lashley comes back with a valid point of his own and says Bobby Lashley has been back in WWE for 1 year, and Bobby Lashley is already a 2-time IC champion, which is true, that's fair enough. That's not to be sniffed at. But then Lashley makes one mistake and he says, what have you ever done, The Miz? And Miz goes, well, I've won all these belts, and he lists them off, and then he says, you know what, you can check my Wikipedia page, which is great, because I think he might have said it as I was opening the tab to get to his Wikipedia page to clarify all the information. I was quite freaked out when this happened, actually. Miz says, also, Bobby, you know what, I did all that without a shred of your natural athleticism, without a shred of your natural ability. And Bobby Lashley goes, yeah, well, let's talk about what you didn't do. You didn't beat Shane McMahon at WrestleMania, and he beats up your stupid-looking dad. And then Miz attacks him, because you can't be going around saying stuff like that, Bob, come on. And this is where the segment really ground to a halt for me, because I enjoyed the whole Miz TV segment, but everything got a little bit slow and a little bit tedious from then on in. So they had a bit of a match. We joined in progress after the commercial break. Shane versus, no, not Shane, I've spoiled the run-in already. Miz versus Bobby Lashley, but you'll never guess what happened. Shane McMahon ran in. Who would have thought it? That's right, Shane McMahon ran in and distracted the Miz with just a normal picture of his dad on the Tron. What? Like, I expected him to go look on the Tron and then for the camera to cut, and there's like George tied up backstage somewhere. But it's just a normal picture of George. And Miz is like, right into a spear. Bobby Lashley wins, and then Shane and Lashley beat him down after the match, and Shane chokes him unconscious with that weird like head scissors, leg trappy thing that he does, and points at Miz on the Tron, or Miz's dad on the Tron, and goes, that's your dad, that is. Ha 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 ha. Now you're unconscious. Best in the world, see you later. And I was like, oh, that segment sort of really ground to a halt there when Shane got involved. I'm going to give it a C, but I am wondering, does this mean that Shane's in like a double feud situation on Raw and SmackDown? I guess he is the best in the world, because you've got his feud against The Miz, which is now over on Raw, with the assistance of Lashley, I guess, and you've got his feud with Roman over on SmackDown with the assistance of Elias, I guess. And that was was that just a one-show thing? Who knows? This gets a C. Next up, we have the Lucha House Party versus the Viking Raiders, not experienced, Raiders, although it could be anything right now because their name doesn't actually get announced this week. Before the announcement can be made, they are jumped on the ramp by the Lucha House Party, getting revenge, of course, for the sneak attack that the Viking Raiders pulled on them last week on Monday Night Raw. It all turns into a match, and then the Raiders hit a bunch of double team moves, not just, the Viking experience, which is that one where they chuck one of them up and the other one gets slammed down. They've got about 4 or 5 different double team moves in their locker, and they're all pretty impressive, and they won in really short order, and I'm going to give this a B. I normally only give squash matches like a C or a C+ if they're particularly good, because they're too short to really develop into anything special, but I've really enjoyed this squash match. I thought it was the perfect sort of matchup between strength and guys who you can just chuck around, and I like the beatdown afterwards, even if it was on my boy Lince Dorado, because yeah, he was the man on the outside, and after the match he got in the ring and they just battered him. Poor Lince. Good bumping, Lince. I'm proud of you. Next up, a moment of bliss at the top of the ramp where Alexa announces now the 4 women's participants, or the 4 Raw women's participants in the Money in the Bank ladder match. It's going to be, see if I can remember this off the top of my head, Natalya, Dana Brooke, Naomi, and then after a big sort of drum roll kind of thing, Alexa announces herself as the 4th entrant. And everyone goes, "What? You don't deserve that." And I'm like, to be honest, out of all 4 of them, in kayfabe, she is the most winningest of all. So yeah, she probably does, to be fair. This sort of breaks down into 2 different arguments. So you've got Dana and Natalya, with Natalya going, "Dana, do you think that I held you back or something?" And Dana going, "You know what, Natalya? Maybe that is the truth, actually." And that's weird because they only teamed for about 5 minutes. The other argument going on is that Alexa's like, "Everyone get off my stage. I want to soak in the applause. It's all for me." And Naomi's like, "I want to match with you tonight because I can beat you anytime I want." And Alexa's like, "I don't want to do it because I've not got my wrestling boots with me." And Naomi goes, "I could beat you with or without my wrestling boots." And Alexa goes, "All right then, fine, let's do it. Let's have a match." And I'm like, I don't think these boots are going to play into it too much. I think that was just a throwaway line. How wrong I was. I'm going to give this a C-. It really felt at several stages like this segment was just going to fall apart, but it was saved by, well, Alexa, who was kind of the glue of the segment, as she so often is, and Naomi as well, who really brought the intensity towards the end, setting up that match for a little bit later on. But the negative side of this is that, well, it was a bit of a ropey promo in parts from some of them, but also the negative side of this, the real negative, is the fact that the choices of the women in the match really exposed how shallow the Raw Women's division is right now. It's almost as if there's someone on the sidelines who they're not using for whatever reason, who would have improved the star power of the matchup. I cannot see a Raw superstar, in the women's division anyway, winning the Money in the Bank briefcase at all. Not a shred of hope for Raw. I'm so sorry. Next up, another backstage sort of Bray Wyatt, spooky Firefly TV show, kids presenter thing. It's all going quite well, but I don't want to get too hopeful yet because they could mess this up at any time. Because it's so out there and so left field. But it's going all right. There's 2 new characters. There's Rambling Rabbit, this little rabbit puppet that pops up from behind the desk and talks to Bray. And there's also Abby the Witch, Sister Abigail, I guess, who always seems to be like being a bit mean to Bray and scolding him for misbehaving. And Bray's like, "Forgive me, Abby. I was a different guy back then." But it's all very sinister, of course. Bray's just done a lovely painting of, it looks like when Randy Orton burned down the Wyatt family compound. You've even got Sister Abigail inside, and of course that's where I think her body was meant to be laid to rest back in the day, 2 years ago when it happened, I think. This gets another one of those question mark grades because I just don't know enough yet. Soon I'll be able to decide whether it's good or not once it turns into something. But for now I'm very hopeful. It's still leaning on the positive side of things for me, and I still think that if they're just really careful, this could totally revive Bray Wyatt's career. I hope, anyway. Next up, we get that match between Naomi and Alexa Bliss that was set up earlier, and Naomi wins because Alexa's shoes keep coming off because she hasn't got her wrestling boots with her. Alright? That's what happened. Okay? I don't know what else to say. D-. And it's not even the fault of the wrestlers, like they didn't do anything wrong. It was just the weird booking, man. I don't even know the point of it, to be honest. If it, helped Alexa win because she was a bit sneaky and a bit Eddie Guerrero about the whole thing, then I'd totally get it. But it didn't. It was just a weak match, a short match, and most of the time it was Alexa fiddling with her shoes, or her shoes getting pulled off, or her waving her shoes around in the referee's face, or Naomi getting the win because Alexa's distracted by her shoes, or lack thereof sometimes. Becky Lynch is out with both of her title belts, and she is interviewed in the ring by Charlie Caruso, I think it was Charlie, who interviews her and says, "Becky, have you bitten off more than you can chew? Because you're defending both your titles at Money in the Bank, and is that a bit much?" And Becky's like, "Well, you know what, Charlie? I could either fight for these 2 titles or I could protect them, and I only know how to fight." And I was like, oh, that is a hell of a line. Becky then cuts a promo on Charlotte, who she does the good thing of like cutting a promo on someone but recognizing them as a threat as well. She does that for both Charlotte and Lacey Evans, and because she's on Raw, she calls out Lacey Evans, who actually comes out. Usually she only comes out on like her own terms, but she actually comes out and answers the call, and she actually wants to fight. So she talks for a bit, but then goes, you know what, I'm sick of talking, bang. And it's not even a sneak attack from Lacey this time, it's just a straight up brawl. It's got pretty good intensity, people get in and separate them, and I like this segment. I thought it was pretty strong from top to bottom, not like the best thing ever by a country mile or anything, but it was a pretty solid highlight of the show, and I feel like it deserves a grade of a B+. Good stuff from both women, especially Becky, who once again was excellent on the mic. Next up, Hawkins and Ryder versus The Revival. Another Hawkins and Ryder versus Revival match, to be honest. But no one seemed to really care at this point. The crowd were kind of burnt out. Come on, Lexington. You've got to stay solid for 3 hours, otherwise I'm going to mention it on video. No, they were a good crowd, to be fair, to Lexington, Kentucky. They were pretty damn good. But for this match, everyone was a bit tired. The crowd seemed tired. Commentary just didn't care. They were just talking about the Revival being called shaving each other's backs earlier. How humiliating. The action in the ring was okay. The Revival, though, lost once again to Hawkins and Ryder, with Zack Ryder reversing a pinfall attempt into one of his own. And Cole went, that was almost a backslide, because he's got a smooth back, because his tag partner helps him shave it. This gets a C- because the action in the ring was decent, but we weren't meant to care about it. Like, at all. Sami Zayn comes out to cut another one of his cynical, fan-hating heel promos, and once again, he's pretty on fire for it. He's great on the mic. This one's about entitlement. He puts it up on the screen, psychological entitlement, and talks about a little boy who asked him for an autograph in the airport at 4 a.m, and he said, no, boo. He says we as fans are entitled and we're not owed anything by him. He doesn't owe us an autograph. Not after all the injuries he's gone through, and not after all of the classic matches he's put on for us over the years. We don't actually deserve anything from him. And then he answers one of the questions that I had before I even had a chance to talk about it. He answers it immediately, and he goes, also, if you want me to just leave, if that's the case, then no. I'd rather stay here and call you all out on your entitlement and hold you all accountable for the things you do. And I was like, yeah, that is a valid reason for him sticking around. I quite like this promo. Yeah, pretty good stuff. So yeah, this gets a B+, but once again, I have to stress that something needs to happen soon. He needs an opponent. He needs someone to fight against. He's a wrestler. He needs someone to wrestle with. Otherwise, it's going to get really tedious really fast. And there already seems to be slightly diminishing returns on these Sami Zayn promos, regardless of how well he's delivering them, just because if it goes nowhere, then people are going to start getting impatient pretty soon. Next up, another match between Rey Mysterio and Samoa Joe, the US champion, but this is non-title. Rey obviously got squashed by Joe at WrestleMania, a fact that Joe reminds him of in the pre-match promo where he goes, your son should be ashamed of you. And I was like, whoa. Dominic can't be ashamed of Rey. He fought for custody over him in that ladder match and won. But Rey Mysterio actually wins this one over Samoa Joe, which I'm not sure I agree with. The match was okay, but the finish was a bit weird, with Joe scooping Mysterio up, but Mysterio kind of wriggled down the back and rolled up Joe, and then Joe lay there with his shoulders perfectly down, and the ref took a little bit too long to make the count, so it just made Joe look a little bit weaker than he even already did, losing clean in a non-title match. Champs lose all the time now, man. It's getting crazy. So yeah, I'm going to give this a C+. I wasn't wild about it. The match was alright, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I saw some people online enjoying it, apart from the finish, which I think everyone agreed was a bit off. But yeah, I just don't think this feud really needs to continue. In fact, I'd love to see Joe in the Money in the Bank picture, because he can hold the US title and the briefcase at the same time. I'm sure we've seen title holders have the briefcase before, haven't we? I'm pretty sure that's happened. So yeah, C+ is the grade. Rey celebrates with Dominic on the ramp. Happy days. Joe's going to get his hands on Dominic at some point. We know it's going to happen. And finally, the last segment of the night, the contract signing for the Universal title match at Money in the Bank between the champion, Seth Rollins, and his challenger, AJ Styles. This was a very interesting contract signing because both men are technically baby faces right now, but Styles did a fantastic job, a phenomenal job, you might say, of playing the subtle heel. Yeah. And they got distracted by my own joke there. Styles says that Rollins has been compared to Styles his whole career. Everyone was like, you're going to be the next AJ Styles. Styles says, you know what? No matter how good you are, you'll never be as good as AJ Styles. You'll never be phenomenal. Seth Rollins has a wicked comeback. He goes, you know what? I never wanted to be the next AJ Styles. I wanted to be the first Seth Rollins. I was like, yeah, go on, Seth, you big old baby face. Be yourself. Stay in school. But then Styles brings up how broken down is Seth after the feud with Lesnar when he was taking F5s on like a weekly basis, or however often I guess Lesnar showed up, because that's a decent point. That I enjoyed that. It reminded me of the Lesnar-Rollins feud where Heyman would bring up tactics, or like Rollins would say Lesnar's got an issue with smaller guys, we've seen it, and Heyman would go, yeah, but he beat them all. I like it when logic is used to hype a wrestling match. I quite enjoy that edge of realism that it can provide. So then we get this wonderful little exchange to end the segment where Styles kind of takes the belt off the table while Seth's signing the contract and then hands it to him, and Seth's obviously annoyed because that's his title belt, and then Seth rejects a handshake from AJ Styles and instead holds up the belt in Styles' face, and Styles is like, alright, okay, and then jumps Seth, and they're brawling all of a sudden, and yes, it looks like Styles is the bad guy, at least in this feud, at least compared to Rollins, even if he's not totally a heel right now. But Rollins gets the upper hand, and then eventually actually Styles works his way back into it and hits a phenomenal forearm from the ropes through the contract signing table. Oh, big ending to Monday Night Raw. Cannot wait for that match. This gets an A-. Really enjoyed the segment. Strongest thing on Raw, I think, by a wide margin, and a strong ending to the show. But how did it do overall? Let's find out. So despite that excellent finish, I'm only going to give Raw a C. It felt like a bit of a lackluster show. There were a few things that just I didn't enjoy, and usually when that happens on Raw, it's balanced out by some good things. There's usually like a great match here or there, or a great promo by somebody. But here, apart from the main event segment, there was nothing really that good to balance out the bad. It was just a bit, meh. Like none of the matches, for example, were particularly great matches. I'm struggling even now to think of what the match of the night was, whereas usually there's a clear standout. It did feel like a pretty long show as well. There were a lot of segments in that, but on the plus side, I guess we did build a lot of stuff towards Money in the Bank. We've got a few different matches going on. I forgot to mention that Miz and Shane have been announced, or I think Miz wants a steel cage match, so that's going to be a pretty fun one, I guess, which could be either brilliant or comically bad, but in a fun way. But yeah, it's all looking alright. I just don't think this Raw really demonstrated it that well. Also, one of the feuds is really excellent, and it's not the Usos Revival one. It's Styles and Rollins. Usos Revival really annoyed me. Anyway, C is the grade. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next week. Thanks very much for watching, and let us know what you think in the comments section down below. You can follow Cultaholic on Twitter @Cultaholic and on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do, then please do check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Cultaholic, where you can pledge. And don't forget, of course, most importantly of all, to hit subscribe and to join us.